You're around 30 years old,
Yeah.
right? You're married, right?
Yes.
The pandemic hit.
Yes.
You decided you want to leave your job
Yeah.
in tech
Yes.
to become a tattoo artist. How did that go down with your parents?
I'm like, yo, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? It was hard. It was very hard. You're starting from zero.
There is a certain stigma around that.
It is huge. Everything is like quick.
Yeah.
Get there quick. There's no stopping this train now, right?
Good morning and welcome to Jugni with Prabhleen. I'm Prabhleen. I'm just gonna start singing every intro now. Happy New Year, you guys. This is the first episode of 2025 and the first interview ever. I got the chance to sit down with Harmanilla, also known as Harman Grewal. He is an illustrator, a painter, a tattoo artist. I really enjoy his work, especially as a Canadian Punjabi. He's known for incorporating a lot of South Asian and Sikh elements in his art, but from like a more contemporary lens. You'll see influences from things like hip hop and anime in his work as well. We genuinely left no stone unturned. As taboo as a topic may seem, we got into it. Starting from Harman's journey from tech to tattooing, how that went down with his very Punjabi parents and in-laws, stigmas around tattooing, the business and finances behind being a full-time creative, pricing yourself, being a licensed artist, like we got into all of it. Even when I was editing, there were so many moments where I was like, oh, that's really good advice. Like I should remember that. But it was like, how was I going to forget when I've watched it 600 times? No, but really, like there was a lot of good advice around, how to be disciplined and patient as a full-time creative. I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. Let me know what you think and let's get into the episode. You know what it looks like? Because of what I'm wearing, it literally looks like I'm on an Indian news.
You're keeping the tradition alive. Yeah.
Like we should be like Gianu.
That doesn't mean exactly. Oh my God, we should, right? We just start giving people financial advice in Punjabi. Yeah. Bank of Canada Kendi. Yeah. Interest rate rokage.
Harmanilla, Harman Grewal, welcome to Jugni.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So first place I want to start, your name, Harmanilla.
Yes.
Where did that come from? I like the sound of it.
So that plays a big factor in it as well. There was a period of my life when I was going to school and I did a massive deep dive just into the life of Muhammad Ali. He's a boxer. And so he had this crazy fight called the Thriller in Manila. Right.
Oh.
And at the same time, I also consumed a lot of content from the producer Jay Dilla, right?
Okay.
And so he was really, really, really good. And for me, I think what I liked was I liked the playfulness of it, like of just ending my name with the ILLA.
Yeah.
I like that it kind of took from these two individuals who I admired.
Yeah.
And I admired their life, the way they kind of focused on their craft. They were always had this kind of spirit of just being more and growing over time.
Yeah. So when was this?
2015, 2014, I would say around there.
So that was like after you graduated?
After I graduated, had to make an Instagram account, had to come up with a name, right? At that time, even though I wasn't technically producing art, I still knew that, okay, you want to come up with some sort of creative name.
Yeah. I feel like that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I've always felt a pull towards it. And it's just like, I'm in like a stable career. And even my mom, she's like, you have no reason to
do this on the side.
And I'm like, but I want to.
Exactly.
Like I just feel a pull.
Yes.
And I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like I feel like I have to do this.
Good. You should listen to that and keep doing it.
I feel like it's like similar for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it was similar. And then at some point I just said I have to jump now.
When you have that like creative itch inside of you, you always you're always drawn to it.
Yes.
And so it's like, even if you weren't pursuing that, you knew in the back of your head, you're like, I'm going to want to do that one day.
Yes.
So let me come up with a sick name.
Yeah. 100%.
I think that was another thing for me, is like drawing from places of inspiration. When I came up with Jugni, actually, like my brother came up with it.
Nice.
But Jugni has just so many meanings inside of like Punjabi poetry, Sufi poetry. I know like the word itself literally means female firefly.
Okay.
Jugni poetry, it's usually the spirit of life.
Okay.
Right? Or like a wandering soul.
That's amazing.
And I feel like as creatives, we are wandering souls. We're moving
Yeah.
from one thing to the other, and we're just like looking for that in like that fulfillment or that peace that makes us feel like, okay, this is fulfilling.
Yes, no, 100%. And I didn't know the fact about fireflies, so that's really cool too.
Yeah. And it's that song that I was singing earlier.
Yes.
We were listening to that. It was by Arif Lohar, I believe. Was his name?
Yes.
He did it
from Coke Studio.
Yeah. Oh, I love Coke Studio.
That I remember the day I watched that. Again, I was in school and university, and I was just in my room, and I played it, and that's it. I was hooked on Coke Studio after that.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, this is it.
Okay, so moving on. You are a full-time artist right now, but you weren't always a full-time artist. And I feel like South Asians generally tend to have a very like complicated journey before they become creatives. So tell us about your journey to becoming creative.
So once I graduated university, like the year before I graduated, I was interning at an on-campus incubator.
Yeah.
And so I fell into that world.
Yeah.
And unknowingly that became my world for like the next like easily 7-8 years of my life, right? It was exciting. I'm not going to say that I didn't like it. Like I enjoyed it a lot. You get to like be a sponge and learn so much from the entrepreneurs around you. You literally see what kind of like, you know, what it takes to be someone who's going to start something from nothing, and like the commitment that it takes to kind of get there, right? And then you see the big wins and everything like that. And I got the opportunity, like fortunately, to work on very interesting projects as well, right? Which informed, I would say, my art going forward as well, right?
Okay, yeah, that was the question I was going to ask you, actually. Like,
because I like to think of like, you know, entrepreneurship and starting a company is like no different to me than, you know, starting a new art project, right? There's that kind of moment when you're looking at a blank canvas and you're like, I don't know what to do right now, right? Like there's paralysis, right? Because you're just like, okay, like the first one has to be the right one, right? Like the first stroke has to be like, I need to know what I'm doing, right?
There's pressure.
Yes. So I feel like, you know, starting a company is it's more or less the same thing, where you're just like, okay, I can't make a mistake, because if I make a mistake, then you know it's gonna fail, right? And I think two parallels that I see between them is just like, you just need to start. If you make the wrong move, at least you know it's the wrong move, and now you know what the right move is, and then you go towards that, right?
It's giving you direction to some degree, or redirection.
Exactly. And you wouldn't know that unless you start, right? So even if I start a painting and I make the stroke and I'm just like, no, that's not good. Well, now I know what is good. And so now I can move forward from there, right? So it's an iterative process. It's constantly evolving. What you start with might not be what you end up with.
It's just being open to what could happen. If you come in with too concrete of a vision with art or business, you get stuck on that.
Yes.
Right? And I feel like CEOs, just like artists, they get attached to like their art or their business, and you don't let it evolve. And when it evolves, then it becomes like bigger than you.
I agree. Like I think in the beginning stages of anything, like you're in this process where I think you have to be a little bit open-minded, especially if you don't have validation yet. Someone told me this once. They're like don't make your art to fit a certain crowd. Like don't think, okay, what type of person am I trying to sell my work towards, right? Like make your art for the sake of making the art. And even if it doesn't happen today or tomorrow, like, you know, people will recognize it maybe one day, but that shouldn't matter to you if it never gets recognized, right? Like make it for something bigger than yourself.
Like right? If it comes from a place of authenticity, then it's going to resonate.
Yes, exactly. If it does, great. If it doesn't, who cares? Just keep making.
I feel like I'm getting excited because all of what you're talking about is kind of where I wanted to go. But to back it up a little bit. So you're in the tech space, the not-for-profit tech space. You're working with like startups, incubators, things like that. And you spent a good amount of time after graduating in that area, in that industry. And then the pandemic hit, right? There was that turning point where you were like, okay, like I'm going to pursue art full time. So what was that turning point?
So it was in 2020. That's when obviously the pandemic started. I remember
Yeah.
in March. So one was the decade. We had a full decade. That, like, I remember everybody's post was, "Oh, this is what like the last 10 years have been." I'm like, "What have I done for the last 10 years?"
Yeah.
Right? Then the question was like, "Well, how do I want the next 10 years to be?" Right? I've studied art. I'm like, growing up, I was like, I'm grateful that I had people around me who told me I was good.
Yeah.
Like even my high school teachers would like write me letters in the summer, like postcards, and they'd be like you don't know how much, like, you're talented.
Yeah.
Like, please do something with this talent, in a sense, like not those exact words, but
Yeah.
that's the message, right? And like, to me, that would hit me later on. I'm like, yo, like, she didn't have to send a postcard in the summer. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not like I was in class or anything, right?
Wow.
And
That's so sweet.
Yeah,
I feel
it
like
is.
that's what teachers are for.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's the kind of role that they really play that impact your life.
100%. And so that was my grade 10 art teacher. And then my grade 12 art teacher, she even asked me, she's like, okay, I have to give the art award to someone in the graduating class out of all of them. She's like, I want to give it to you, but I also want to give it to someone who I know is going to pursue art.
Because you weren't majoring in...
No.
You were majoring in psychology, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I majored in psych, and I was doing business when I started Western. And so I told her, I'm like, Miss, I'm not going to be doing art. And so I'm like, whoever else you have in mind, because she told me, she's like, otherwise, if it's not you, it's this person, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, give it to her. I thought about those things, right? And then when I went to school, I did 2 years of business. Then I switched into visual arts. Again, a moment of reflection. I was just like, you know what? Like, art was something that I feel like I naturally kind of gravitated towards.
Yeah.
Like the projects didn't feel like homework. They just
Yeah.
felt like another project that I got to work on.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, I think I need to stay aligned with that a little bit more. So I just switched without telling anybody. And then after, my parents are like, oh, like, is anything going to come out of this?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it'll come out. I'm like, it'll happen. I'm like, I'm still doing psych on the side. Yeah. And then now let's fast forward. I keep like going around this question.
It's okay. No worries.
So 2020, I feel like I was thinking about all these moments where it's just like, okay, like, your teacher said you were good, you did it, you went to, like, you got your specialization in a post-secondary level, and then through the nonprofit that we started, we had a lot of artists come through as well. Like, Rupi did her first Brampton gig there, right, which was completely sold out.
Yeah, I think I was
right?
there for that.
Nice.
Yeah,
okay.
when she did her first reading.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so being there and seeing all that, then it just kind of, I was just like, okay, like, but I never did anything, right? Like, I never
Yeah.
did anything with what I learned, or this, you know, this natural feeling that I like, this thing that I enjoyed doing since I was a kid, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like comparing it with my work, where, like, you know, your employer is asking you to give, like, your not even 100%. It feels way more than 100%, because
Yeah.
that's why we have burnout, right? I just asked myself, I'm like, if I'm willing to, like, you know, stress and give so much to these organizations, what if I put that exact same amount of energy towards my own art?
Yeah.
Right? I'm like, what could happen?
Yeah.
And then so that question didn't leave me. That question of, well, what could happen if you just focused all this energy here instead? What made me kind of, I guess you could say, pull the trigger,
Yeah.
is like, obviously growing up in like a Punjabi family, like, your cousins are your friends.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hanging out with my cousins, and, you know, like, I have one cousin who's completely tatted up, essentially. like he's got probably the most, right?
Yeah.
And he kept telling me, he's just like, you know, like, you should think about getting into tattooing. Like, you're really good at drawing. Like,
Yeah.
why don't you consider this as an option, right?
Yeah.
And I listened, but I don't think I internalized it as like, yeah, like, I should actually look into this.
Yeah.
Until my wife said it, and she's just like, you know, like, you should think about what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
And like, do some research.
Yeah.
And so then I did some research, and then I fell into the rabbit hole, and then I started watching videos, I started listening to other artists.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, you know what, like, this has a lot of alignment with all the things I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get to create all the time, I get to meet new people, like, the variety factors there. Plus it's something that's in demand. So I'm like, I feel like it's like, you're not going completely off the deep end, right? You're taking, like, you know, a good, like, somewhat calculated step.
Yeah.
Not to say it's easy,
Yeah.
like, it's still very hard.
Yeah.
But it made sense, right?
Yeah. So you're around 30 years old,
Yeah.
right? You're married, right?
Yes.
The pandemic hit.
Yes.
and you decided you want to leave your job
Yeah.
in tech
Yes.
to become a tattoo artist.
Yes.
Yes. How did that go down with your
Yeah.
parents?
Yes.
But I feel like what's even more interesting, how did that go down with your in-laws?
Yeah, no, 100%. As I was thinking about this, like I had encouragement from like my cousins, my brother-in-laws, everybody like that. But then when it came to the immediate family, right, that's where I think I needed that extra like encouragement.
Yeah.
If the parents aren't for it or the wife isn't for it, it's like, okay, like, you know, that's something you have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it should stop you if you feel like you're pursuing something that's true.
Yeah.
But when they say like, okay, I think you can do it, it gives you a little bit of a boost. You're just like, okay, now I know I have your support. Like I can focus a little bit, I think, without having this feeling of like, you know, like, oh, I'm also letting you down, right?
Yeah.
So with in-laws, they were supportive, 100%. Like they are supportive.
You mean they weren't like, oh, I thought my daughter married a guy in tech and now he's a tattoo artist.
So I think that they had their questions and concerns,
Yeah.
like in that exact same respect that you said. But I think they also understood that, like, I'm not the type of person to kind of just go off completely off, like AWOL in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Like where he was working and like his position and everything, that lends itself to a certain amount of credibility, so that we know that like, okay, whatever he chooses to do next, we know he can do it,
Yeah.
right? So we're not super worried. Plus, like, you have to give like credit to my wife as well, who also told them like, you know, this is not something to worry about.
I mean, she was the one
right?
that gave you the idea or like pushed
Exactly.
you in the first place.
Yes. So I think like definitely she handled it on her end as well.
It's so helpful to have a supportive partner.
Yes, 100%. And you know, the other factor is, I guess, like they're in Italy, like they're not here,
Okay.
right? So I think distance does play a factor.
Yeah.
Like when it's not day to day, you're seeing them very often and regularly.
Yeah.
And they're always being like, okay, so how's everything going,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. But what about your mom and dad?
So with my mom, it was good because my mom has her own electrolysis business set up.
Oh, okay. What's
So
electrolysis?
electrolysis is like permanent hair removal.
Okay.
It's just a different method of hair removal.
Okay.
And so she's been doing this for more than a decade now. The business of having clients and performing a service.
Yeah.
And then she knew how much I liked art. She obviously, like, the parent, if teachers are coming and saying like, this is really good, like,
Yeah.
you know, they're also absorbing that information and being like, yeah, like, he is good, right?
Yeah.
So she was easier. Like, she
Okay.
was like, she's like, I know you can do it, right?
Do you think that like she had a harder time wrapping her head around like the tattoo part of it more than anything? Because like there is a certain stigma
Yes.
around that.
So not in the beginning, but after, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. I think when she started seeing what tattoo culture was like, you
Yeah.
know, like the artists and like, you know, like there's artists who are completely tatted, like
Yeah.
head to toe, right?
Yeah.
And like sometimes like you said, there's a stigma, and sometimes there's like, you know, counterproductive like lifestyles, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes that lifestyle, you know, like you want to kind of say like, you know how like you think about a rapper lifestyle,
Yeah.
like very loose,
Yeah.
very like, you know, wild a little, right?
Yeah.
So like tattooing lifestyle with certain artists can also be like that.
Yeah.
So I think when she saw that, then she started getting worried. She's like, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
Right? But I told her, I'm like, you can't compare me to other people, right? Like, yes, I'm a tattoo artist, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'll be like that tattoo artist, right?
Yeah.
So, plus the ball was already rolling at that point, right? I'm like, there's no stopping this train now, right? I think when you make a plan, you decide to do something with like an honest effort, there's a time of commitment that's required
Yeah.
for you to see something, like some fruits from that labor.
Before you
right?
decide to give up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yes, my mom was supportive.
Yeah.
Where I needed that encouragement to
Yeah.
make that big decision. And then so my dad was in India though.
Okay.
So my dad, I know my dad is supportive.
Yeah.
But I knew when I'm at that point of making the decision, this isn't a time to bring this up to him, because he can probably, you know, put on that dad hat, like you were bringing up earlier, where is this going to take you, right? How are you going to be able to support yourself and a family?
Yeah.
And like, you know, all the ambitious things that parents have laid out for their kids, right? So I feel like it was going to be more of a, you know,
Challenge?
back and forth. Yes,
Yeah.
a challenge. Yes, that's perfect. But, you know, that's also partially maybe my own fear as well. We do grow up having this kind of, you know, thought in our head where it's like, if you're not used to having these types of like deep and meaningful conversations with your parents, you know, like it's not to say that like, okay, one day you'll just be ready to have it, right? Like, yeah, dad, I can approach you with this life-changing move right now, right?
There's a transition. And also I think there's that transition of like, you're a child in their eyes and you're an adult.
Yes.
And sometimes they can't let go.
Yes, exactly. So with him, I was lucky. He was in India.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, like I'm just going to start.
Yeah.
And once I have like enough under my belt in this kind of area, then I'll let him know.
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, my mom still told him, and she just let him know, like,
oh my
just
God,
so
it's
you
always
know.
the moms. It's like always like, oh, can you talk to dad? Can you talk to papa, please?
So I didn't ask her to do it. Obviously, after a couple of months, you know, husband and wife are obviously going to talk with one another, right?
Yeah.
If I had to approach him, it was challenging. Because I'm like, yo, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? Like, you know, you build it up in your head. So my apprenticeship was 1.5 years.
Okay.
So halfway through that, I think is when like he came back and he was just like, oh, okay, so you're tattooing now.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yes, I'm tattooing now. Yeah. I'm like, I'm still working. The decision of making like going into tattooing in 2020 didn't mean that like I let go of my job, right? Like I did my full-time job and I did my apprenticeship. And because you don't get paid in an apprenticeship, right? And if my apprenticeship is 1.5 years, like I can't, you know, you can't not make something like for 1.5 years, right? Like you don't have that runway. So I kept the full-time job like up and as much as I could up until the moment where it was like, okay, now you just need to focus on this full time, because if it's kind of you're doing like you know, half a foot in here and half a foot there, you're not going to get the returns.
You're not giving all of yourself to one thing.
Exactly.
So how many hours were you putting into the apprenticeship while you were working full time? Because
it was the pandemic, obviously we were at home, so and so my day would be like a regular day, like 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time would be at the shop, like evenings on during the weekdays, and then all day during the weekends. These guys are like, they're hard on you because they expect a certain level of quality out of you.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to be in that. When I started there, they were like, you're not like, we recognize your portfolio. We understand like you've gone to school for this, but we're not taking that into account on your apprenticeship. Like from your apprenticeship, you're starting from zero. Like you're starting from fundamentals of drawing, right? Like you're just making basic circles and spheres and cubes, and you have to focus on your values and all that kind of stuff, right? You know, it was very hard. But for them, they were like, this is the right way to learn. Yeah. Like, and you have to have patience, right? Like you have, like, it's crazy because we come from tech where everything is like quick, get there quick. Like we
want to fail fast.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when you're here, it's the exact opposite, where they're just like, you need to slow down, bro. Like you need to chill. You like your work is being rushed too fast. Slow down, take your time, right? Wow. For them, they're like, if you want us to teach you, you have to put in these hours. Like these hours are expected from you, right? And so for me, I was like, okay, cool. Like I have to do it, right? I'm like, otherwise, like I'm not gonna become a tattoo artist, right? So in that sense, it was just necessary.
Sorry, back to your dad. So it was really more in your head.
100%. I'm sure it was like I'm sure there's a lot in my head. Yeah. I also know my dad very well. Whatever hesitation I might have had in the beginning stages of this, like I'm sure he would have probably been like stay where you are, right? Like you know, you're doing well where you are, exactly. And so just stay there. Yeah. Like I'm 100%. I feel like he would have said that. Yeah. Or he would have told me to do something else, right? Yeah. Like get into this field, like, you know, like I'm just gonna say real estate agent, but like not to say like that's what he's gonna say, right? Yeah. So. And that's nothing to say about real estate agents. I'm just saying, like, I feel like that's something he would probably say. Yeah. And it would probably be a little bit harder for him to wrap his head around tattooing and art and stuff like that.
So, like, has he wrapped his head around it now? Because you've been in it full time for 1 year now, right?
So this August it'll be 2 years. Okay. Yeah, that I've been taking clients on. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So you think they're finally like, okay, this is
they're
stable.
Yeah. So they're always still asking, like, how is it going? Are you good? And everything like that, right? But they know that, like, okay, like this is where he's gonna stay. Okay. Right? They're like, you know, we're not gonna talk him out of it or tell him to change or anything like that.
And what do you think was like making them ask you that? Like,
So for my mom, it was just, the culture. It goes back to the stigma and everything. Tattooing, it comes from such a stigmatized place, just the craft of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, like it started out for criminals, right? Like where like people used to mark criminals and the tattoos they received was based on the crime they committed. So society would be like, okay, stay away from this guy because he's clearly a thief.
So this is in the West, right?
I know this was in like Japan. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how it was like all across the world because every culture has its own connection and tradition when it comes to body markings, right?
See, that's the thing. When I was preparing for this, I was looking up, because that's my thing, like looking up the history of whatever. And I was looking at the history of tattooing in India.
Okay.
And there's a really long, rich history of tattooing. It's actually just part of like the culture. Like girls sometimes in certain tribes, when they were coming of age, they would get a tattoo to signify that they're like women now. Okay. Right? Or even during the partition in Punjab, everyone would get tattooed like Ek Onkar or Om, or like Muslims would get the moon, the crescent moon, to signify like, okay, this is our faith, this is our religion. If we get lost in the chaos of it all,
people will be able to recognize
us. Like babies, they used to put it on their babies in case they, were separated from them. My nana has a Ek Onkar on his hand.
That is very cool.
So I was actually thinking, I'm like, if your parents ever had anything to say about that, like it is
draw on history.
It really is a part of our culture, so deep into our culture.
And see, this is what I love, because that's not something I knew. But if it wasn't for like what I'm doing today, I wouldn't have known that, right? So thank you for that. What I've heard similar types of stories within our community. This kind of talks more about like, very male dominated culture back in the day, right? And so like women would get their husbands' names. And if they ended up getting lost somewhere, like if they're not allowed to speak to anyone, they would be like, well, here's the name. And then someone would be like, okay, I know where they live. Let me go take you there. Right. Like I've had people tell me that, like some of my clients who are Punjabi and stuff too. They're like, this is also like where tattooing would be utilized back in the day as well.
Interesting. Because from my research in terms of like the tribes in India, it was very female oriented. Tattooing was like another way to ornament your body. Okay. Right? Is another ornament to add to your body and decorate your body. So it was very like female focused. And there's actually an Instagram account called Ink Archives of India or something. Nice. And their whole project is like they're trying to archive the tribal tattoos and the meanings behind them. And so they like women that they see in the street in India, wherever, they'll ask to take a photo and then for them to explain like their tattoos, and they're like so detailed. If there's anything I know about India and tattooing, it is huge. Like everybody in the shop that has taught me and is a teacher, like I have one mentor, but I have many teachers. They're all from India, and the level of like, attention to detail and the care like towards tattooing that they have, like I don't see it similarly here in Brampton and stuff from other artists, right? Like they truly look at it as this is an art form, like a very distinct art form that like you have to become a master in, right? Like, and this is a lifelong process. There's no shortcuts to this, right? And so like when you listen to them talk about it, and then you listen to them talk about their mentor who taught them in India, and then the kind of like the lineage keeps going, like you're just like wow, like I never looked at it before in that way. But it's so cool to like understand and be a part of something like this, right? I feel like art in India is very much a devotion. Like you're devoted to it. It is a commitment. And I think sometimes I think about, because art is so rich in our culture, in South Asian culture, I wonder, I'm like, why are our parents so against us going into these like industries or these fields? Obviously the first being stability, financial stability, money, things like that. But I also think there's this stigma in their minds where if you become an artist, you're a wandering soul, because you commit your life to the art. Like Sufi poets, Qawwali music artists, tabla players, whoever they are very devoted to their art. Like it is their life, and they let go of like family. Sometimes they're like, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to participate in society. I'm just going to become like a nomad. I'm going to become an artist. So I'm like, I wonder if my parents are like, oh God, is she going down that route? And that's their hesitation.
Yes. It could be. I think you're more right on the first stability side. Like,
Yeah.
at least that's what I think.
In the modern day, yeah.
Exactly. Being kids of immigrants, we know how the immigrant lifestyle is, right?
Yeah.
So like they're coming and they're obviously only thinking about like, you know, stability. Because for
Survival.
them, yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
for them, it's like, we don't have the luxury of like, you know, like figuring out or seeing where art can take you.
Yeah.
Like we just know that there's certain careers that guarantee a certain outcome, and if you pursue these, then you'll be good. Like you won't have to live life the way we had to live it, right?
Yeah.
So it always comes from an honest place,
Yeah.
right? But I think for us, you decide your life as well, and for you, it's just kind of like, okay, I understand. Like you guys were in survival mode, but I think that time also made you who you are today. And I think survival or having this trial period in someone's life is very important for their growth.
Yeah.
So as much as you want to kind of shelter your kid from that, I feel like I would want to experience it because you know that the growth is going to be good as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like you have to go through the fire, right?
Yes. Yeah. So going back to being a full-time artist, that's a big commitment, right? And you mentioned like, you know, being a part of this apprenticeship program, the tattoo shop that you're at, they keep you really like in check.
Yeah.
Outside of that, because I feel like the biggest thing about being a full-time artist is discipline.
Yep.
How do you keep yourself disciplined?
Okay, so shout out to 9 to 5 Inc. That's the shop that I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to discipline, for me, environment plays a big factor.
Yeah.
The team there is always talking about, you know, work on your own stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's not just about, you know, like a client comes in, you get to create something for them, unique for them, you know, like care about all of that, you know, put your best foot forward, do a great job. But outside of that, they're also like, but make sure you're working on your own stuff. Like don't stop drawing. Like this is your sword that you need to keep sharp, right? And there's only good things that are going to come out of you focusing on your own art, because that'll inform your tattooing as well, right? It's like, you know, like before you draw, you need to do early like exercises to loosen up your hands and stuff, right? So it's just stretching in a sense. So I'm happy that I have people around me that are always like, so did you make something new? Like, what are you working on? You very quickly learn to let go of any sort of like this feeling of like I'm being critiqued.
Yeah.
Because over there, it's like, you know, everybody comes and sees what you're working on and everybody provides their 2 cents. And it goes both ways. Like it's encouraging, but there's also the little bit of like, here's what I think you can do to make this better, right? And you learn how it becomes like a give and take with the whole team.
Yeah.
And being in that environment, I think really helps with the discipline. I'm constantly battling, like even for myself, you also need to be creating, you know, when you get home, put some hours into, right? And so, cause I can't be doing a large scale painting at the shop, but I can do it at home. I have my whole setup at home, right? And so, and when I come home and I just look at it and I'll just say, yo, I got to put some time into this right now, right? And so I think the other thing that helps with discipline, the environment of like the people around you, but then, you know, like at home, I have everything out. I have my easel out. I have all my paintings in front of me, like the ones that I'm working on. I have all my brushes. Like everything is like, you know, like if I want to get started, there's no friction to getting started,
no barrier.
Right? Exactly. Like I can literally just, all I have to do is squeeze some paint out of a tube and then just, that's it, right? And then I think the last thing is deadlines. So committing yourself to a deadline, like having some sort of project deadline. Yeah. Like right now I'm working towards an art fair that's happening in April. Okay. So I have to create a body of work for that. Yeah. So for me, I'm just like, okay, that's the big thing that you need to have the independent art ready for now, right? So for me, like I see always like how that pushes me to be like, okay, get up early, or stay awake until 2 or 3. It doesn't matter. Like you just got to get this done now. Yeah, right?
Yeah. I feel like the biggest thing that I could relate to is the community aspect, because like as a dev, like I'm at home working from home, right? And then I'm creating content alone from home. So it's very isolating. Yes. And that community, it's just like, it makes you feel less alone, but it also, the community brings in accountability. Yes. And that kind of like being able to find that community, that's like part of the reason for me doing this podcast. I'm just like being able to connect to other creatives and then feel a little less alone and like, oh, okay, you also had a hard time like bringing this up with your dad. You also thought about like, okay, how am I going to financially like create stability in my life? That just makes you feel like, okay, like I'm not that like much of a, what do you call it, like a black sheep, right? Because you feel like a black sheep when all of your other cousins are all like, you know, doctors or in tech or lawyers. There's that black sheep. And then you're the
only one, right? No, 100%. I completely get it. So community, 100%, deadlines, and then I think making it as easy as possible for you to get to that, right?
Exactly.
Those have been helpful for me.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect thing. Like, trust me, like in the midst of all of it, sometimes I'm telling myself, I'm like, why didn't you wake up earlier yesterday, right? You could have put like a good like 1-2 hours into this, and like seen progress, right? So that's why I mentioned like it's a battle. It's a constant battle.
So becoming a full-time artist, I think we've been touching on finances, financial stability, all these things. Do you look at yourself as a business?
I think I do. It's a balancing act. So that's where I was talking about in the beginning with the parallels, because with business, I feel like sometimes like when you're creating a product, you're thinking about, okay, well, what's the need I'm filling here? And so you're thinking about the customer. You're thinking about the where it's going to end up.
Product market fit.
Exactly. And sometimes like I feel like that can cross into thinking about the art, and you're just like, okay, like where is this going to fit? Right? But then again, it goes back to that conversation. It's like, but you shouldn't care about the fit, right?
Exactly.
Like make it for the sake of making it.
Yeah.
So I think to a certain extent, there's looking at it as a business in the sense of like, you know, like there's the fundamentals of like make it a transaction, you know, there is value here that you're providing. So put a price tag on it and accept payment no matter how much it feels like it feels weird or wrong or something like that. Like set up like some sort of level of like a brand in a sense, right?
Exactly.
Like how do you want to put yourself out into the world, right? Like what's your messaging and like what is it that you're trying to communicate with even the work as well, right? And you know, have your website, have your portfolio up, right?
You end up having to take up all these different hats, right? You're just like, okay, so now I'm a social media manager. Now I'm a I don't know, a marketing executive or something, or like I'm producing something, or
sometimes you're like, you know, like a front end like no code developer.
Exactly.
You're just like, yo, I got to get this website up right now, and this button needs to work.
You're a copywriter.
So and you can easily get lost in that. Like I know sometimes when like I was working on my website, like I just got sucked into just the website. And I'm just like, yo, I need to get back to making stuff to put on this website, right? So I think there are elements that are required when doing full-time art that are business related. I just think you have to come from an honest place though, like for when it comes to the content and the work and the actual thing that you know that you want people to consume.
And going back to like you talking about like accepting payment no matter how uncomfortable it feels, I feel like especially when it comes to like creative works or services, there's always that uncomfort, right, with finances, and like especially pricing yourself. Like how do you deal with that?
So to this day, the people around me will always say, you're not pricing enough. Okay. And so I think I've always kind of battled with like, okay, like how much of like, what is the right price for something that I made right now? Right. So in 2022, I got accepted into my first art fair. Right. And that was like a milestone on its own because I thought I wasn't going to get accepted. What I applied to is the Untapped Emerging Artist category. So that's the one where they award you a free booth. Depending on all the applications and stuff, right? So that was validating. And then it was there, I was kind of learning about how to price my work because it was there kind of like, you know, the days when you're setting up. Like I had my initial prices that I was just like, okay, I think this is the right price. Like, I don't think this is too high. I don't think this is super low. I'm like, I think this is something I'm comfortable with. And then as soon as I start looking at other people's booths, like the night before the first day, everyone's just like ridiculously high, like compared to what I set it at, right? Like, let's say like I set something at like maybe 150, right? Like something that's maybe like 16 by 20 size, right? If I set it at 150, I'm going around and I'm looking at people pricing at like 800 or 900. And it was but also the work is different, right? The work is of a different quality, different medium and everything like that. So I'm taking that all into account, but I'm still looking at it. I'm like, yo, but I think there's room to go up here. I'm in an area, I'm in a fair where the buyers are of this type. I think I was thinking about it like that. Like, you know, I'm not thinking about this as in like, is this expensive to me or is this the right price to me?
Yeah.
I think I started realizing, I'm like, but the people coming, like 150 isn't something that they're just like, yo, I'm going really out of pocket here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I bumped everything up by like 100. Everything, like almost everything got sold.
Yeah.
Right. And that was validating.
Yeah.
And then that validated now the price point to me. Right.
Yeah.
Because now I learned, I'm like, wow, like this isn't too high. I'm
Yeah.
like, people are willing to buy this.
Yeah. Do you factor in the amount of hours you put in?
Yes. So the amount of time I put in, like I factor that in as well. And so those works I had created at that time, I would put, like time wise, I would put a month, but that month would be broken up into, like, you could say maybe 1 to 2 hour sessions every night.
So are you kind of pricing roughly hourly?
I look at it hourly. I think at a base level, I'm looking at, okay, if I did a base per hour, how much does this come up to? But if that number felt wrong, still, like I felt like, yo, that still feels like a lot for this, right?
Yeah.
Then I would price down, right? Then I would go, I'm like, okay, but let me make this a little bit more digestible for what I'm used to, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because we're going based off our own like lived experience or however we came up and stuff. But I definitely learned from going to the fair, I 100% price down. I think artists do price down, and I think there are people out there that when they look at your work, they're like, yeah, like if you slap 500 on it, they're like, yeah, take it. There's different markets. The Toronto market was different than what I was used to in our hometown. And so I was just like, okay, cool. Like there is a market here that can, you know, afford this. So now when I look at my works, I can look at it hourly, but if you ask me, do I have a formula? I don't have a formula right now, right? I have a lot of factors I take into account, and then I go with it, right? And then I use that as a data point going forward again. So now I can say, like, you know, okay, if this work in this context, a 1-of-1 with something I put this much time into, sold for this much, someone actually bought it for this much. Now I know at a baseline I could at least put this up under the same kind of context. And I'm okay with that. That doesn't mean someone's gonna go and buy it, right? But I'm okay with being like, okay, I can put that price up, and I could be like, okay, you know what, that's fine, I'm okay with it, right?
So do you remember your first paycheck from art?
I remember a person who bought artwork from me for the first time, and this was when I was still in school. And I had created my own...
Like university?
Yes. And I had created my own piece. Just like, it wasn't a project or anything. I just made it. The person who bought it, she was just super supportive of like art and everything. And she just knew how, like, you know, I liked art and I liked making stuff. And
so how much did you sell that for?
I think 200. Right? Yeah, I sold it for 200.
That's a good starting... Like, that's a good first paycheck from art. How did that feel? Getting that sale?
I took a picture. I was like, yo, I want to take a picture. Like, I just want to, you know, like have this moment, right? And so again, that felt very validating. It kind of gives you this another notch on your belt to, like, when you're asking yourself, am I an artist? Am I an artist? Like, you can look at that and be like, well, someone bought your work, right? So in that sense, I think it definitely was very validating and encouraging. I would say recently because then there was a massive gap of time where I wasn't doing anything. So recently, probably the most validating paycheck is, so when I went to the art fair, I actually ended up getting a licensing agreement with HomeSense. So they sold my work as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was like a paycheck. So that was like an actual check that I received.
So how does that work? How does the licensing agreement with like
so
like HomeSense work?
So they have a third party that does all the prints. What happens is the people who can, I guess, they're in charge of deciding, okay, what kind of work do we want on the shelves? Like, because HomeSense and Winners, this is the same, right?
Yes.
So they come to these events, these fairs. And so they approached me and they're like, oh, like, we really like the diversity in your pieces.
And this was that art fair?
That art, same one, the first one.
Okay.
Right? And they're like, we really like the diversity in your pieces. Like, this is 100% something that we're looking to have and, like, you know, provide to our own audience and customers. Like, would you be interested, right? And sharing your work with us if you have more work like this and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I'm like 100%. I'm okay with that.
That's awesome.
So we shared emails, and then they put me in touch with their their distributor, like their third party, like that does the prints.
Okay.
So what they'll do is, my works were digital, so they'll ask for the digital. So HomeSense, as the buyer, has requested this many prints of your work, of this artwork, right?
Okay. So do you kind of send them like your portfolio, or do you just
Yes.
create you pick and choose dedicated numbers that you're like, I'm willing to sell this as a print?
The second one, like the stuff that was in the art fair that I didn't sell,
Yeah.
because when I sold them, I said 1 of 1, right?
Yeah.
So even though if they asked for that, I'm like, I can't sell that because that's already committed.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I have something else that's similar to this. Right.
So then how does the pricing work? Are there negotiations that happen around that?
So they have like a set price. This is how much we'll buy each print for.
Okay.
Right. And then this is how much we're going to sell it for.
Okay.
And then this is how much of a royalty you can expect from us. Right?
I see. So you get
Yeah.
royalties,
Yes.
and you get like just a base pay for...
No base pay.
No
So
base-
it's
okay.
it's
It's all royalties?
royalty.
Okay.
It's a percentage of the price before they mark it up to sell. Okay?
Okay.
So like if they bought something for like $20
Yeah.
and they sell it for like 40,
Okay.
I'm going to get a percentage of the 20.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this was my first time going about it. So
Yeah.
I same thing, same curiosity as you. Like I didn't know what to expect. I was okay with the royalty. I had a lawyer look at it. They're like,
Okay.
yeah, it's fine. They're like,
Yeah.
everything seems standard, right?
Yeah.
And so
Do you have your name on them?
I
on the
do.
prints?
I have. So they print a little profile with your picture.
Oh, that's
And they have like a little bio
awesome.
beside it. So when they sell it, so like, cause I didn't know when it hit the shelves.
Okay.
Like they didn't send me an email. They're like, oh, by the way, it's on
Yeah.
the shelves now officially, right?
Yeah.
And here are the locations or anything like that. Like there's a lot that I learned. I'm like, there's a lot of communication kind of like, work that needs to be put in to kind of understand, okay, like I gave you the work, but I don't know
Where it's ending up.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? And the way I found out is family members in Calgary would send a picture. They're like, yo, we saw your work at HomeSense because they have my picture there, right?
That's
And they're like, that's so
awesome.
cool. Congratulations,
That must have
right?
felt so nice to have people like
Yeah.
see you, recognize
Yeah,
you.
I had past colleagues that I used to work with. They were sending me from like different parts of Ontario, right?
Wow.
And when I got the Calgary one, I was like, I'm like, this is out of Ontario. Like, I'm like, this is now in Calgary, right?
Yeah.
So I was visiting the HomeSense in Brampton.
Yeah, and you didn't see them?
No, there weren't.
Aw.
It made me think a lot. I was just like, like the demographic here is
Yeah.
probably a good demographic to put this in front of.
Yes.
Right, because the content is based on that,
Yeah.
but it's not here, right? So how they make the decisions, I have no idea, but it was very like you're saying, like that paycheck feeling
Yeah.
of getting like a royalty. It comes in the mail and you're just like super cool.
Yeah.
And then if they want to, if based on the amount of purchases, they'll be like, okay, we want to do another run again.
Yeah.
So then you get another paycheck, right? And then they're just like, if there's any more work, please feel to, like, now the connection's there. So like if there's any more stuff, just please
You can
feel
always
free to
share
send
that.
it. Yeah. So in that sense, that was very validating in that sense. I'm like, now I know what it's like to kind of be, I guess, an artist who licenses their work out. I know where I could do better, and I know where I would probably do a little bit different. But it was
What
a
would
great
you do
learning.
different?
So what I would do different, and what I would recommend for any artist to do differently, is have multiple conversations. My expectation was, I'm like, I want to do a marketing campaign around this. Like, I actually want to know the day you do this. I want to know the location.
Yeah.
I want to go there myself, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you want to capture it as much as possible.
Okay.
And use it as an opportunity to kind of celebrate, right?
Yeah.
I would say, like, I'm going to be critical. They fall short on that because they didn't communicate that information.
Yeah.
And that left me like a little bit like confused, because I'm like, I love the fact that my cousin in Calgary is messaging and sending me this.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I should know if it was going to be there or not, right?
I see.
I'm like, because I think it helps the artist plan and organize their own self.
So
that
is
way.
it that you just didn't think to ask that at the time, or is it that they just...
I think
tell you?
I was trying to find that balance of like, yo, I don't want to bother them too much, and
Yeah.
you know, you don't want to lose it either.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just trying to be respectful, and you're just like, you know what, like let it play out. It's the first time. Maybe this is just how it is, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say if I did it again, I would take a little bit more control. Like I want these assurities before we move forward, right?
So how does it work when you get approached for commissions? Because I know that you did a couple commissions. You did that like painting of Soni Pabla for Icky's She's the One.
Yes.
So things like that. Was that a commission?
Yes, it was.
How did those work?
So usually someone will reach out and then they'll just let you know like, hey, this is what we have in mind. And then I'll be like, okay, let's set up a conversation. Like, let's set up a quick chat.
Yeah.
Just so I can learn more about what it is that you want. Because I want to make sure I give you what you want as well, right? I spoke to Revive. And then any questions I would have, he would speak to Icky. And they also had to make sure that Soni Pabla's like family or estate, like they'd be okay with it as well, right? Yeah. I like to work iteratively again. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to work on something. I'm going to start something. But I'm not going to put a lot of time and effort yet. And so I want you to, like, I'll show you a work in progress. You
loop them in early.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Because the last thing you want is you give them something and they're not happy.
Yeah.
And that's my fault because, like, I'm not someone who has such a distinct style where it's just like, like, I know what I'm getting out of you.
Yeah.
Like, I know that if I pay you this much, this is what I'm going to get. And I know I'm good with it. Right.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm just like, I want to understand what is it that you're going for. It's approached a lot like doing a tattoo, honestly. Like when someone comes and says, hey, I want to get a tattoo.
Yeah.
It's just all the same preliminary questions. Okay, like what inspired you to get this?
Yeah. Do
you have references of things? Like, how people create mood boards? Like, do you have references or images that you saw this? You're like, I really like this.
So that was probably an exciting one because that had a lot of visibility in our community, right? Like that was really big when it came out. Yeah. And like, I feel like the art fair and everything, that's a milestone on its own. But like, everyone, like all your cousins, all your family, your parents, they're seeing all of that. What was that like?
So that was a surprise to me too, because when I initially had created the piece, I didn't know that this was gonna be created for unreleased vocals of Soni Pabla, right? Like stuff that's never been like seen the public sphere before, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't know like all the other artists that were showcased in the video were also gonna be in it as well. They said it's gonna be in the music video. Obviously, like this is gonna be that stand-in to be like, here's Soni Pabla, right? I guess I didn't realize how much it would take off or like how viral it would go to a certain extent, right? Yeah. I didn't know any of that.
So was that overwhelming?
It was very overwhelming. Yeah.
You're like, I was not prepared for this.
I was not prepared at all. I just put it out there on my own page and I was just like, okay, cool. Like, this is a cool thing that I want to just kind of like share.
Yeah.
And it just got picked up and then kept getting shared. And then before you knew it, I was just like, okay, like this is like the most viewed thing that I have on my Instagram page right now. It's weird how technology and our relationship with it is. Like when you get a like, how it makes you feel. Right. Yeah. So it's like you think about like, wow,
like a dopamine hit.
Yeah. And so moments like these feel like a rush and you're just like, I feel like I have a hangover now. Like after like it comes off and you're just like, okay, like now it's back to regular life again. Right.
But do you feel like it's like, okay, so now I got to go bigger?
I feel like there is this sense of just like, okay, you can do that.
Yeah.
So, like it gives you confidence. I see the validation from so many more people now as well. I should be more okay with saying I am an artist. I do create work because I feel like that's something I'm constantly battling sometimes.
Yeah. So when it comes to transitioning from being a visual artist on paper paints to a tattoo artist, what was that transition like and what were like your learning curves?
It's completely different. Like you can't make a mistake, right?
Yeah, because it's like permanent.
Exactly, right? Like in digital you can just I can tap 2 fingers on the screen and it goes back.
Yeah.
When it comes to painting, you can paint over, right? With tattooing, you really have to it's like you're going for 0 mistake, and let's say if you feel like you made something like a bit of a mistake, it has to be the smallest so that you can adapt with it. The eye of the tattoo artist has to be different than the eye of like an average person. I feel like tattoo artists are very, very self-critical. Like we'll look at our work after, and it doesn't matter, like the client could be the most happiest person in the world. They're like, yo, it's perfect, it's exactly how I want it. Everyone can look at it, could be like, yo, you did a good job, but you can look at it and still be like, but that's not where I messed up, right? Like,
you're not gonna say that,
like that. No, obviously not. But you're gonna be like, that's bothering me. Like I think I could have done that a bit better, right? Every person has that in them, right? Like I'm sure, like, you know, anything that you put out, you'll look back and you'll be like, okay, like maybe that could have been a little bit better. Like, and I think it's healthy to a certain extent, right? Because you're seeing, okay, now I know where the growth needs to be a little bit more, right? But with tattooing, because you're going in skin, you're making a permanent mark, the level of care and the level of attention that you're paying to the smallest stroke is so much more intensified, right? It's like crazy intensified, right? And then you're also adapting to the person's skin. Everyone's skin is different, right? Like when the needle goes in, you have to see how is the skin taking the ink, and then how is it coming up, and then you have to adjust your equipment accordingly. Do I need to increase the voltage now? Do I have to, like, so
it's a completely different medium.
Yes, exactly. It's a completely different medium, so it's not the same to me as drawing, definitely, right? Like you have to, you put a lot more planning in place before you make that final mark, right? And then you're just focused on making sure that is like as good as it can be, right?
What advice do you have for upcoming artists? Because like there's no playbook to this, or even like looking back at yourself when you were, you know, thinking about transitioning to becoming an artist, or thinking, hey, could I even do that? What do you think would have helped you back then?
Only thing that if I could go back in time and tell myself is just start sooner. Don't overthink, where am I going to find the time? I have so much I'm doing already, I don't have time for this. Like, don't think about that. Just start putting all the pieces there. Like I said, like, you know, like if you need to find a community, try to find one person and then two people. Shrink the amount of friction that it's going to take to start, right? So like having my
reduce
stuff
the barriers.
out. Exactly. Put some level of a deadline to yourself. Like one thing about the visual arts community is we have Inktober, which is like all the whole month of October, you have to create one drawing a day. And so before the pandemic hit, like I was doing little things like that.
So just practice.
Yeah, and so I just said, like I said, like on day one when I posted it, I'm like, I'm gonna do Inktober. So now you're telling everybody like, hey, I'm doing this thing for a month.
So you're accountable.
Exactly, right? So I think if you can put yourself in a position like that, where there's a way to kind of keep you accountable to something, publicly, then I think that 100% will help in terms of, you know, putting some pressure on you to be like, okay, I got to do something now, right? And then if you fail, it's fine to try again, right? Like I've failed so many times, right? So I think it's just, you know, you have to start, and then once you start, you're figuring it out.
We're actually out of time.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is awesome. This is a great first podcast. Thank you so much for coming and making your way all the way out here. I know Toronto's a little far. But I appreciate you coming out here on your day off and starting this first podcast with me. Thank you so much for being so open and so vulnerable. Harmanilla on Instagram. And 905 Ink Tattoo. Exactly. That's where you're tattooing in Brampton.
If you need a tattoo or if you need anything in terms of art, like you're saying, commissions and stuff, definitely hit me up on Instagram. And in general, just hit up 905 Ink. Congratulations, first episode done.
First episode done. Yes.